One quiet evening, an old woman steps into a moonlit forest and discovers a dying wolf. What she does next will astonish everyone in the village and beyond. The forest at twilight was a realm of both beauty and trepidation. Towering pines cast elongated shadows on the carpet of moss and fallen leaves. Somewhere deep inside this realm, a solitary wolf lay gravely wounded, its labored breaths stirring the silence of the undergrowth. Meanwhile, in a quaint village nearby, an old woman named Eudora locked her door and set off into the woods with slow, deliberate steps. Though frail in stature, her eyes held a calm determination nurtured by years of living in harmony with nature. The townsfolk whispered about Eudora, calling her eccentric, a wise woman rumored to speak with animals. Some credited her with healing battered strays, while others branded her a recluse with little sense of caution. Yet beneath those hushed rumors, Eudora possessed a quiet empathy that reached beyond human boundaries. That very evening, something in the wind, or perhaps a deep intuition, told her that a wounded creature roamed the forest, needing help. Without hesitation, she heeded the call. As dusk thickened, Eudora advanced through the gloom, guided by an unexplainable sense of direction. Footfalls soft against the forest floor, she finally discovered the source of her concern. A large, battered wolf collapsed beside a creek, eyes clouded with pain. Any other villager would have fled, for wolves were predators to be feared. Yet Eudora inched closer, ignoring how the beast's ribcage rose and fell in agonized rasps. In that silent standoff, old woman and dying wolf locked eyes, and in that moment, an unimaginable bond flickered between them. Nobody in the village could have predicted what happened next. The quiet bravery of an elderly woman refusing to let fear reign, the unknown secret that allowed her to approach nature's fiercest predator, and the astonishing aftermath that would leave those who witnessed it utterly stunned. This is the tale of Eudora and the wolf, a meeting at the edge of life and death that would redefine loyalty, compassion, and the unspoken language bridging two distant worlds. Prepare for an emotional story spanning heartbreak, courage, and a bond that surpasses what most believed possible, all unleashed by a single, improbable encounter in the moonlit woods. Eudora's life was a tapestry of quiet tasks and subtle gifts. Honed by decades of living close to nature, widowhood had come early, and with no children around, she channeled her nurturing spirit into caring for local wildlife. Even in her 70s, she frequently roamed the outskirts of the forest, leaving small offerings of food for shy fawns or wounded birds. Villagers, curious yet uneasy, saw her as someone coexisting with the wild in ways they neither approved of nor fully understood. Within the village, stories circulated about how Eudora once nursed a fox cub back to health and freed a snared hawk. Yet these were lesser feats compared to the gossip that she claimed to feel the forest's pain. "The wind whispers to her," some teased. Others whispered she might be a witch, though none had ever seen wrongdoing from her. Truthfully, Eudora simply listened, really listened to the rhythms of the land, something modern life often overlooked. So when Eudora felt an unshakable sense one evening that a suffering creature lay just beyond the tree line, she did not question it. Her advanced age did not deter her from trusting that instinct. Ensuring a few herbal supplies and bandages were tucked into a worn leather satchel, she quietly left her cottage at the wood's edge. Neighbors, glimpsing her silhouette at dusk, assumed she was after mushrooms or wild plants. None guessed she was answering the forest's silent plea. Guided by faint rustling or an intangible pull, Eudora navigated deeper than usual. The forest's hush weighed heavily. No bird called to, no squirrel scampered. It was as if every living thing awaited an outcome. Then, by a narrow creek glinting with moonlit reflections, Eudora found the dying wolf. Even from a distance, she saw blood staining its grey coat and one leg twisted unnaturally. Its flanks heaved in shallow, erratic breaths. She recognized it as likely the alpha of a local pack. Magnificent, with battle scars earned from territory fights or hunts gone wrong. Logic demanded caution. A wounded predator is unpredictable, desperate. Yet Eudora, feeling no fear, approached slowly. The wolf attempted to snarl, but only a weak growl escaped its throat, muzzle trembling from pain. Its eyes, though fierce, flickered with panic. Eudora knelt a few feet away, cane set aside. "Poor soul," she murmured, voice gentle as a lullaby. She let silence stretch, letting it sense her presence was not a threat. Perhaps it recognized her intangible aura, for the wolf did not snap or attempt to rise. Instead, it collapsed in exhaustion, muzzle resting on the damp ground. Cautiously, Eudora inched closer, rummaging in her satchel for herbs and clean bandages. She began humming an old lullaby from her grandmother's teachings. The forest, still as a painting, listened as an elderly woman lightly pressed a cloth to the wolf's bleeding flank. The beast flinched but lacked strength to protest. Eudora whispered reassurance, carefully examining a deep gash that might have come from a hunter's bullet or from another animal's attack. Either way, infection threatened. She cleansed the wound with cool creek water, applied a herbal poultice, then wrapped it in cloth torn from her own apron. All the while, the wolf watched with a mixture of confusion and a hint of acceptance. Several times, Eudora paused, allowing the wolf to sense her sincerity. She offered small sips of water using a cupped hand. To her amazement, the wolf lapped it, eyes half-lidded. In that surreal twilight scene, two living souls, one near the end of life, the other well beyond her prime, shared a fragile communion. Hours passed unnoticed, until Eudora realized the moon was high, and the wolf's breathing, though still labored, had steadied under her gentle care. By the time she rose to leave, Eudora looked upon the battered creature with a pang of sorrow. She knew it might not survive alone, yet she also understood that forcing it to follow her was neither wise nor feasible. So she whispered, "Rest. I'll return." The wolf didn't snarl but lay there, panting softly, one golden eye following her departure. If any villagers had happened upon this scene, a stooped old woman tending to a dying wolf as though it were a wounded child, they would have been speechless. But none witnessed it, leaving the entire forest as silent witness to this improbable tenderness. Returning home past midnight, Eudora collapsed onto her wooden rocking chair. Fatigue gnawed at her bones. Her heart raced, replaying every detail. She had done something unthinkable, bridging a gap of predator and prey. Part of her believed it might be in vain, that the wolf might succumb overnight. Yet a stronger faith within her insisted that a spark of life remained in that battered body, waiting for compassion. She resolved to return at sunrise, bringing more potent salves and a meager portion of food. The possibility of a miracle glimmered, that a single old woman's healing touch could rewrite the final chapter of a wolf's life. In the hush of her dark cottage, Eudora prayed silently, neither for glory nor reward, but for the wolf's survival. Her own tears dampened her pillow as she drifted off, uncertain how the morning would greet her. Little did she know that her quiet act of courage would stir not just the forest's fate, but also the hearts of everyone who'd soon learn about the dying wolf and the woman who dared to approach it with open hands. Daylight found Eudora anxious to return to the creek. Despite the worry in her joints, she prepared a small bundle, more herbal ointments, fresh bandages, a container of water, and scraps of food. She felt an odd swirl of dread and hope. The wolf could have died in the night or vanished seeking solitude to pass away. Or worse, maybe a passing hunter discovered it. Whatever the scenario, Eudora knew she had to see if her late-night intervention offered any chance of survival. Walking through the forest that morning felt less foreboding than it had in darkness. Sunbeams pierced the canopy, revealing a realm teeming with life. Birds warbled overhead, squirrels darted along branches, and Eudora's every step brought her deeper into nature's hush. She tried to quiet her racing heart with the same lullaby she'd hummed to the wolf. The final approach to the creek was fraught with tension. Was the wolf gone? She paused behind a cluster of ferns, scanning. To her immense relief, the wolf was there, lying in the same spot by the water, battered but alive. On hearing Eudora's soft footsteps, it stirred, raising its head. A faint growl emanated, more out of reflex than aggression. She lowered herself, speaking in gentle tones. "It's me again. I mean no harm." The wolf, exhausted, did not leap up or bare teeth. It recognized her presence, though whether it was grateful or merely resigned was unclear. Eudora noticed dried blood matted in the fur around the bandage. She quietly approached, heart pounding each time the wolf's eyes followed her. Settling a few feet away, she offered a morsel of boiled chicken from a small pouch. The wolf sniffed but turned its muzzle away. Perhaps pain overshadowed appetite. Undeterred, Eudora peeled back the bandage slowly, checking for infection. The wound looked raw, though not as inflamed as expected. She cleaned it carefully, applying more salve. Throughout this tender process, the wolf winced but resisted any violent reaction, letting Eudora continue. It was a tenuous trust, a fragile alliance balanced on Eudora's unwavering calm. Eventually, the wolf licked a few drops of water from her cupped hand. It even tried a piece of chicken, swallowing it with a pained grimace. Eudora interpreted this as a hopeful sign. She lingered for nearly an hour, humming soothing melodies and occasionally stroking the wolf's thick fur near its uninjured shoulder. The beast's eyes, half-lidded, occasionally glimmered with confusion, or perhaps some primal recognition of kindness. Before leaving, Eudora promised to return that afternoon. She parted with a final gentle brush of her hand against the creature's ear. Despite the lingering intimidation of being so close to a wild predator, an indescribable empathy anchored her actions. Over the next days, Eudora repeated this routine. Neighbors noticed her heading into the woods twice daily, carrying water and bandages. Some asked if she was collecting rare herbs. Eudora, typically guarded, gave vague replies. She feared if the village discovered she was treating a wolf, they might call hunters or brand her insane. However, after a while, a few villagers openly asked, "Have you found an injured animal? Do you need help?" The lines of secrecy blurred. Eudora's partial confessions about a wounded creature piqued curiosity. Some thought she was being reckless, while others felt a spark of admiration. One day, a young man named Bren approached Eudora. He was known for occasionally venturing into the forest to hunt small game. "I heard whispers you're healing something dangerous out there," he said. Eudora confirmed it was a wolf. Bren frowned. "A predator can't be reasoned with. You should let nature take its course or call me to put it out of its misery." The suggestion jolted Eudora, but she calmly insisted the wolf deserved a chance. Bren gave her a tight-lipped nod, cautioning that if the wolf recovered and roamed the village, people might panic. Eudora merely sighed, resolved to see it through. Meanwhile, the wolf's health subtly improved. Daily cleansings of the wound removed infection threats. Each visit found the wolf slightly more responsive, nibbling at morsels, even standing to lap from the creek. Eudora marveled at its regal form, imagining it once commanded a pack. When the wolf managed a shaky step away from the creek bed, she gingerly followed, ensuring it didn't collapse. Bit by bit, the creature tolerated her presence, even leaning on her for support. This progression melted Eudora's heart. She'd never thought a wild apex predator could show such vulnerability in her care. However, as rumors circulated that the old woman's harboring a wolf, more suspicious villagers murmured about safety. A few insisted that any day the wolf might regain strength and become a threat. Without official community endorsement, Eudora's clandestine rescue hung by a fragile thread. She started hearing talk of men wanting to track down the wolf. For everyone's safety, she knew time was running out. If the wolf's presence was widely known before it fully healed, it could face lethal confrontation. Desperate to protect the creature, Eudora attempted guiding it to a secluded spot deeper in the forest. But the wolf, still weak, struggled to walk far. Every shuffle was accompanied by pained whimpers. Realizing this might be too perilous, Eudora devised an alternative plan: create a discreet shelter near the creek. Gathering fallen branches and a tarp from her cottage, she fashioned a rudimentary lean-to that provided some dryness and camouflage. Each day, she left food and water in that discreet nook. The wolf, though wild at heart, seemed to grasp her intention, resting inside to avoid the elements. With the wolf's condition slowly improving, Eudora worried about what would come next. Would it remain in the forest, or attempt to rejoin a distant pack? Could a lone wolf survive once partially reliant on a human caretaker? The old woman realized the final outcome wasn't wholly in her hands, yet she pressed on, convinced that empathy was the best gift she could offer. The more she aided the wolf, the more her own sense of purpose swelled. Perhaps in healing it, she was healing a piece of herself. The companionship, fragile though it was, filled the void left by her solitary life. However, tensions in the village threatened to override her progress. She heard mention of a wolf hunt, rumored among local men eager to eradicate any threat. If they discovered the wolf's location, all her efforts could be undone. Anxiety gnawed at Eudora. Should she hide it further? Should she attempt to speak out about coexisting with a rehabilitated wolf? Fear and hope tangled, forging the next dramatic turn in her story. For if the old woman, faced with external hostility, still dared to stand by the wounded beast, that might truly shock everyone, fulfilling the destiny hinted at by her unwavering compassion. Deep in the heart of the forest, Eudora's daily routine of tending the injured wolf had grown into a remarkable ritual. Each morning and evening, she ventured from her cottage to the hidden lean-to shelter near the creek. Over time, the wolf's strength slowly returned. It could stand on all fours for short stretches, groom itself, and even let out a soft, rumbling growl that seemed more a greeting than a threat. Still, the wound on its flank demanded ongoing care, requiring fresh bandages. Each gentle wrapping session deepened the bond between caretaker and beast, an intimacy rarely found between human and wolf. On more than one occasion, Eudora found herself leaning against a tree, watching the wolf's chest rise and fall in peaceful rest. She felt an overwhelming sense of guardianship, as though entrusted with a sacred duty to restore this creature's life. Late one afternoon, the wolf roused itself enough to limp across the creek's bank, investigating shrubs and sniffing the breeze. Its movements, while still halting, carried a renewed dignity. Eudora was astonished to see it not flee from her presence, but occasionally glance back, as if acknowledging her role in its survival. For Eudora, these small gestures overshadowed her physical aches and the village's whispered fears. A wordless understanding flowed between them, she, the caretaker, and it, the patient. She frequently hummed soft lullabies reminiscent of old forest tunes taught by her grandmother. The wolf, though it couldn't comprehend the words, seemed lulled by the melodic hush. No onlooker who believed in rigid predator-prey dynamics could have imagined such synergy. However, as the wolf gained strength, the village's rumors turned more restless. Hunters reported footprints or howling at dawn, suspecting a wolf had survived an injury and was now regaining power. Some were incensed by the notion that a reckless crone was feeding it. A few men formed an informal watch group, planning to search the forest and finish it off if found. Eudora caught wind of this plan from a sympathetic neighbor and panicked. Should the group locate the lean-to, they'd see fresh tracks, bandages, everything confirming Eudora's involvement. Torn between hiding the wolf or urging it to depart, Eudora concluded that the wolf might still be too weak to wander far. Leading it closer to the village for protection would be suicidal, given the hostility. Her mind spun with the question, if confronted, could she persuade the men not to harm it? She doubted so. Fear proved a potent motivator. The entire dynamic threatened a violent clash if something didn't change. One evening, Eudora decided on a bold plan: relocate the wolf to a deeper, more secluded region of the forest, away from the usual hunting paths. If it could hide there while continuing to heal, the villagers might forget about it, thinking it vanished or died. Then, if the creature fully recovered, it could choose to roam free or find a new pack far from human interference. However, convincing the wolf to follow was uncertain. She also needed help, someone she could trust. A quiet opportunity arose when Bren, the young man who had initially warned Eudora to euthanize the wolf, approached her cottage. He admitted that seeing Eudora risk her safety daily made him question his harsh stance. "I'm not comfortable with a big wolf near the village," he said, "but if you say it's healing and not a threat, maybe we can guide it elsewhere." They formed an uneasy alliance. Bren possessed some wilderness skill, enough to help escort the wolf out of range. Eudora, though wary, recognized his practical knowledge might prevent missteps. She extracted his promise not to harm the wolf unless absolutely forced to defend himself. At dawn, Eudora and Bren set out for the shelter. She explained to the wolf in her gentle murmur that they wanted to move it somewhere safer. The beast, reading the tension, paced restlessly. Bren sized up the creature's posture, acknowledging the wariness in its eyes. They offered the wolf a harness improvised from ropes. The first attempt to slip it on led to low, warning growls. Eudora's calm voice eventually eased the tension, and Bren gingerly looped the harness over the wolf's chest and shoulders. The wolf shuddered, ears flattened, but it didn't snap. Eudora stroked its neck, whispering encouragement. They set off, traveling slowly. The wolf limped, leaning occasionally on Eudora's cane or Bren's gentle pull. Eudora carried her herbal kit, occasionally pausing to soothe the dog if it whimpered. Each step through brambles or uneven ground threatened to strain the wolf's healing leg. But they pressed on, mindful that any confrontation with villagers might be lethal. After nearly an hour's trek, they reached a rocky ravine overshadowed by dense conifers. Far from well-trodden routes, it offered natural concealment. Just as they were guiding the wolf across a narrow creek in that ravine, a trio of men appeared from behind boulders, members of the Watch Group. Sighting the large wolf and its harness, they shouted, "Guns drawn!" Eudora gasped, stepping protectively in front of the beast. Bren raised his palms, exclaiming, "Wait, we're moving it away, it's not attacking!" The men, adrenaline high, aimed rifles. One barked, "That beast is a killer." "Step aside, old woman." Terror pulsed through Eudora. The wolf, sensing danger, bared teeth in a pained snarl, though too weak to lunge. She refused to move. "Please," she cried. "It's wounded, recovering. It means no harm." Bren added that they had nearly relocated it out of range. The men hesitated, uncertain. They recognized Bren as one of the village's own, but fear fanned their hostility. One singled out Eudora. "You put us all at risk, coddling a savage beast." In that critical instant, the wolf locked eyes on the men, hackles partially raised. Eudora sensed chaos might erupt. Summoning a voice steady with conviction, she bellowed, "I have cared for this wolf with my own hands. See, it does not attack me. Why must you kill it?" Her raw plea froze the men mid-trigger. The hush that followed held the entire forest breathless. The men, seeing the wolf barely standing, the ropes around it, realized how vulnerable it looked. Slowly, confusion replaced their rage. After a tense standoff, the group's leader lowered his rifle. "If it's leaving our territory," he grumbled, "fine. But if it shows up again near our village, well, we won't ask twice." Eudora, tears brimming, nodded. Bren guided the wolf forward. The men parted, scowling but not firing. A potent wave of relief flooded Eudora. The wolf, though panting with anxiety, followed their lead away from the confrontation. That day marked a turning point. The old woman, the wounded wolf, and a group of armed villagers came face to face, each side grappling with fear and fragile trust. Eudora, unwavering, shielded the creature that once could have killed her. The men, though resentful, yielded to her earnest stance. As she and Bren ushered the wolf deeper into the forest sanctuary, it was clear that no easy resolution awaited. Yet the seeds of tolerance had been sown in that pivotal standoff, shocking everyone who witnessed an old woman willing to risk her life to protect a dying wolf. The question remained, could these seeds grow into true acceptance, or would suspicion and fear eventually claim victory? In the aftermath of that tense confrontation with armed villagers, Eudora, Bren, and the wolf pressed deeper into the uncharted ravine. Their relief at avoiding bloodshed soon yielded to the challenges of forging a safe new haven for the wolf. The creature's leg, though healing, still limited mobility, demanding frequent pauses. Bren scouted around, ensuring no other hunting parties lurked. Eudora used each stop to clean the bandage, offering water from her canteen. They came upon a glen encircled by tall pines, with a small trickling spring at its center, a perfect place for the wolf to rest. Bren suggested building a temporary shelter here. Eudora agreed, reasoning that the wolf needed time to rebuild strength. Gathering fallen branches and thick pine boughs, they constructed a crude lean-to under the overshadowing canopy. Though not as well appointed as the creekside lean-to, it provided dryness and seclusion. The wolf, drained from the trek, lay down with a labored sigh. Eudora again checked the wound, relieved it hadn't reopened too badly. Bren, though typically stoic, couldn't help admiring the dog's tenacity. "It's a fighter, all right," he murmured. Setting aside their fear, they prepared a small bed of moss and leaves to cushion the wolf's battered flank. With dusk approaching, they realized a nighttime stay might be necessary to ensure the wolf didn't try wandering or injure itself further. Bren built a small fire at a safe distance, mindful not to alarm the wolf. The flames cast flickering shadows on the pines. Eudora, leaning on a fallen log, hummed her lullaby. The wolf's ears twitched, occasionally glancing at them. The day's tension weighed heavily. Both Eudora and Bren replayed the close call with the armed men. Only the presence of reason, or perhaps compassion, had spared them bloodshed. Eudora exhaled a shaky breath, whispering her gratitude to the silent forest. As midnight approached, the wolf stirred, feebly testing its legs. Eudora rose to offer help, gently guiding it back to the bed. She realized that, with each passing hour, the wolf was forced to rely on her, a bizarre role reversal for a creature that symbolized raw wilderness. Meanwhile, Eudora found her own sense of solitude diminishing. The wolf's acceptance glowed like a fragile lamp in her heart. Bren, typically gruff, confessed amazement. He'd grown up hearing legends of vicious wolves devouring livestock or attacking unsuspecting travelers. Yet now he witnessed a scenario defying all such narratives. An elderly woman nursing a predator with calm strokes, the wolf not biting but softly resting its muzzle on her forearm. "You truly have some gift," he told Eudora in low tones. She shook her head, murmuring, "It's no magic, just empathy. The poor creature is only dangerous if cornered by fear." Bren, pensive, realized that the same logic might apply to many conflicts among people too. Despite its injuries, near dawn, the wolf roused unexpectedly and attempted to limp away from the campsite. Eudora recognized a primal urge. Maybe the wolf smelled something or felt the call of the wild. She worried it might aggravate its wound or run into humans. Half asleep, she followed at a distance, watching it vanish between the trees. She braced for heartbreak. Had it abandoned her care or possibly collapsed further away? She could do nothing but wait or search frantically. Bren, also awakened, gave chase but lost the trail quickly. 2 hours later, just as Eudora and Bren debated how to find it, the wolf returned quietly, blood staining its muzzle. Alarmed, Eudora feared a fresh fight, but on closer look, it was from a rabbit or small prey. The wolf had begun hunting for itself, albeit with difficulty. This sign of self-reliance both relieved and troubled Eudora, who realized the creature was reasserting its wild nature. The line between caretaker and unstoppable predator was again delicate. Yet the wolf let Eudora recheck its wound, accepting her presence with a resigned calm. As the days advanced, Eudora and Bren re-evaluated their approach. The forest glen was safe from easy discovery, but the wolf needed more rest. Eudora couldn't remain out here indefinitely, nor could Bren. Eventually, they had to let the wolf remain on its own. Eudora voiced her desire that once fully healed, the wolf might rejoin any distant pack or roam further from humans. But for now, she resolved to continue daily visits, possibly bringing minimal supplies. Bren, though unaccustomed to such devotion, promised to help as far as his schedule allowed. Outside of the forest, rumors brewed that the wolf had simply relocated deeper in. Some men suspected Eudora aided its move. Fitzpatrick declared the matter unfinished, warning that if the wolf returned close to farmland, the next confrontation might not end so peacefully. Eudora gleaned these rumors from a friend, feeling a pang of worry. Could she truly keep the wolf hidden forever? With each passing day, the beast grew stronger. Sooner or later, it might wander. She prayed that by then, its distrust of humans might be tempered enough to avoid conflict. Though physically exhausted, Eudora never questioned her course of action. Something about the wolf's eyes, once filled with agony, now showed acceptance of her help. She felt she was witnessing a miracle of sorts, a bridging of ancient boundaries. In the quiet hours by the campfire, she sometimes recounted to Bren or to the dozing wolf the stories of her youth, how she once tended to an injured deer or found an orphaned badger. But none of those experiences matched the profound weight of caring for a wild wolf known for its fearsome might. As the weeks continued, Eudora recognized her own mortality pressing upon her. She was no young caretaker bounding through the forest. Each day with the wolf felt like a gift, and each moment gleaned with it might be among her final bright chapters. Yet she pressed on, unwavering, ignoring the looming storms of suspicion from the villagers. If helping this dying wolf survive meant risking her own comfort, so be it. An unstoppable current of empathy guided her choices now, forging a bond that would soon test the entire community's sense of wonder and fear. In the hush of the glen, predator and caretaker edged closer to a destiny that would shock them all. With each passing sunrise, Eudora's quiet forest refuge for the wolf resembled a scene out of a fable. The battered creature, its once fiery aggression dimmed by pain and Eudora's gentle care, sought daily solace under the lean-to. Eudora and Bren continued delivering water and occasional morsels, mindful not to overhumanize the wolf, so it could remain self-sufficient in hunts. The creature's leg improved, scars forming over what once threatened to be a mortal wound. Nonetheless, the wolf's posture remained guarded, always scanning for danger. Back in the village, rumors that Eudora was still coddling a savage beast set tensions on edge. Despite the earlier confrontation, some men remained convinced the wolf spelled doom if it ever roamed near farmland. A few insisted they form a second, more organized hunt. Fitzpatrick, lacking official authority in this faraway forest area, quietly endorsed them. If that old woman can't see reason, we must protect ourselves. But as weeks passed with no new sightings of the wolf near farmland, the impetus for a mass hunt cooled. Yet the hush was precarious. One minor livestock incident, like a calf or goat found half-eaten, could reignite fury. Eudora, aware of this risk, urged Bren to quietly keep an eye on any rumored livestock losses. For the moment, none surfaced, suggesting the wolf stuck to deeper forest hunts, occasionally aided by Eudora's supplementary feed. But the old woman recognized it was only a matter of time before the wolf might test its boundaries, or the villagers might push for final closure. As Eudora's dedication became an open secret, a few villagers who respected her healing prowess started offering discreet help. One elderly widow, Myra, left small meat scraps at Eudora's door. Another young mother, grateful Eudora once cared for her ill child with herbal remedies, donated a warm blanket to line the wolf's shelter. Though they never visited the wolf themselves, they recognized Eudora's cause was born of compassion, not madness. These subtle acts of solidarity buoyed Eudora's spirits. She no longer felt wholly alone. Bren also found himself defending Eudora among peers. At the local tavern, when men sneered about that crazy woman risking our hides, Bren calmly explained that the wolf was healing away from farmland, with no sign of aggression since, step by step, a pocket of the village started warming to the idea that maybe Eudora's care was preventing new incidents, not causing them. One brisk afternoon, Eudora approached the lean-to and found the wolf not lying inside but standing on all four legs at the clearing's edge, muzzle tilted to the breeze. She paused, marveling at the creature's stance, still thin but brimming with quiet vitality. The wolf's ears swiveled upon her arrival. It flicked its tail in recognition, an action that might be read as faint acceptance. As she approached with water, the wolf stepped closer unbidden, sniffing her outstretched palm. Eudora nearly wept at this sign of trust. She placed the dish down. The wolf calmly drank. Something had changed. The old barrier of fear eroded further. Their eyes met, a silent conversation of gratitude and caution. "You're strong again," Eudora whispered. "Yet you still linger here. Why?" The truth, she sensed, was that the wolf had come to rely on her kindness, bridging a gap that once made them enemies in nature's eyes. Another possibility, it recognized that venturing toward human territory alone could be deadly. So for now, the wolf remained tethered by a quiet pact of mutual care. Eudora also realized she dreaded losing the wolf, having grown fond of its presence. She told herself the best outcome was for it to rejoin a pack or roam free, but her heart clenched at the idea of never seeing it again. She accepted that heartbreak might be part of this journey. Just as calm enveloped Eudora's hidden campsite, the forest wind carried a rumor back to the village. A traveling merchant claimed to have spotted a large grey wolf and an old woman walking side by side. Exaggerated tales spread that Eudora had tamed a beast as her pet. Alarmists fretted that once fully healed, the wolf would lead others to the village. Talk of a renewed hunt simmered. A small group of villagers, armed with rifles, muttered about taking matters into their own hands. Sensing an imminent threat, Bren hurried to warn Eudora. She listened gravely. If these men discovered the exact location, violence was inevitable. The wolf, though improved, remained vulnerable to bullets. But how to hide an animal that sometimes roamed at night, leaving footprints near the creek? Eudora weighed urging the wolf to move deeper still, but worried about pushing it beyond safe range of her care if it wasn't fully recovered. The risk of confrontation soared. Faced with looming danger, Eudora made a decision that truly shocked those who heard it. She would speak publicly in the village square, urging restraint and explaining that the wolf was no threat. Many predicted disaster. How could she reason with fear-driven men? Yet Eudora believed an honest appeal might forestall violence. She wasn't naive. She had lived too many winters to underestimate fear. But if she remained silent, the wolf's fate was all but sealed. Gathering her strength, Eudora penned a short speech. She hoped to convey how caring for this beast not only prevented attacks but also revealed a higher moral principle. This was no ordinary dog, but a symbol of bridging the wild and the civilized. She confided in Bren, who worried for her safety if the crowd turned hostile. Still, Eudora insisted, "I must try. We owe the forest that much." Thus, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation in the heart of the village. Eudora, normally reclusive, planned to stand before neighbors, explaining how she found a dying wolf, nursed it, and sought no harm. She prayed that sincerity, seasoned with the credibility of her lifelong benevolence, might quell the thirst for a hunt. Meanwhile, the men rumored to be arming themselves might see her stance as foolish. The tension peaked, echoing the unstoppable momentum of a story that began with a single wounded beast. Now, the old woman's unwavering compassion would either sway the village or break against the wall of fear. In the hush of anticipation, even the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if humanity would choose empathy or destruction for the wild predator that once lay dying under the pines. On the morning Eudora planned to address the village, a hush of curiosity spread through Briarwood. Word had gotten out that the old woman, rumored to be raising a wolf, intended to speak her truth in the town square. For some, it was an opportunity to glean the real story behind the gossip. For others, especially hunters, this was the moment to challenge her. Eudora, kneeling in her cottage, took a moment to steady her nerves, the memory of the wolf's trusting gaze fueling her determination. Close to midday, villagers congregated around a worn, raised platform typically used for market announcements. Eudora approached with Bren by her side, head held high despite her stooped posture. A swirl of whispers swelled. "There she is, and the woman who tends that savage beast." Some parted politely, while others stepped back warily. Fitzpatrick was there, arms crossed, representing the group that found this scenario misguided. A hush fell once Eudora climbed the steps, leaning on her cane. She cleared her throat, scanning the faces, some curious, some suspicious, some openly hostile. In a quivering yet steady voice, Eudora began describing how she discovered a dying wolf, how she felt compelled to heal it, and how it never once attempted to harm her once it sensed her gentle approach. She spoke of bandaging its wounds and feeding it, describing how fear receded when empathy took precedence. Some listeners scoffed, but many were transfixed, quietly enthralled that such a fragile elder had dared to approach a mortal threat. She continued, explaining that forcing a wounded animal to face a hunting party would only breed more aggression. "If I'd turned away that night, maybe it would have died or crawled near a farm in desperation." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "I humbly ask we not meet it with rifles. The wolf is healing far from the village, relying on natural hunts. If we allow it time, it may rejoin the wild or move on. Killing it isn't necessary." Murmurs rippled. Some nodded, seeing reason. Others bristled, arms folded tight. Fitzpatrick stepped forward, giving voice to the fear-based stance. "If you release a strong wolf back into these woods, We risk losing livestock or, heaven forbid, a child. You claim it's no threat, but what if you're wrong, he demanded, eyes flaring. Eudora, meeting his gaze, replied, Is fear reason enough to kill, with no proof it menaces us? This wolf already had every chance to harm me, but did not. The forest is its rightful home. We can coexist with caution. Her calm defiance startled some. Villagers began speaking up. A farmer insisted, I can't afford to lose any goats. Who pays me if the wolf hunts them? Another man countered, She's right, fear alone shouldn't justify a kill. Tensions flared. Miss Alvarez, the councilwoman, tried to mediate, urging a balanced approach. She reminded people that Eudora's presence averted potential attacks by nursing the creature quietly away from farmland. The crowd found no unanimous consensus, illustrating the deep divisions stoked by primal fear. Suddenly, a voice from behind the throng exclaimed, Let the old woman prove it. The speaker, a known huntsman, proposed that Eudora bring the wolf, once stable, into a designated clearing near the village, where an observer group could see it wasn't a mindless killer. The suggestion baffled Eudora. Wouldn't that risk spooking the wolf, or lead to vigilantes ambushing it? She shuddered at the idea, certain the wolf would panic among a crowd. Fitzpatrick smirked, pouncing on the concept. Yes, let her show the docile nature she claims it has. If it attacks no one, maybe we'll stand down. A murmur spread, some nodding that such a demonstration might end the debate. Eudora's heart clenched. Her mission was always to keep the wolf away from humans, not parading it for suspicion, but she recognized if she refused, cynics might claim she was hiding a ticking time bomb. Ms. Alvarez looked concerned, whispering to Eudora that no law forced her to comply. Eudora weighed the dilemma, subject the wolf to a public test, or risk a lethal confrontation by men who wouldn't rest until they saw proof. Summoning composure, Eudora softly said, I must consider the wolf's well-being first. Let me speak with those who help me. I'll return with an answer soon. The crowd dispersed with no resolution. Some believed a demonstration was the only solution, while others found it reckless. Eudora retreated to her cottage, mind swirling. She confided in Bren and Miss Alvarez. If I bring the wolf to them, it might panic or lash out if cornered. That defeats our message of trust. But refusing might lead them to track it down forcibly. They debated alternatives, maybe a smaller group of witnesses or a carefully controlled environment. The risk, though, remained high. That evening, alone in her small living room, Eudora lit a single lantern, pondering the weight on her shoulders. Saving the wolf hinged on bridging fear, but how could she ensure the beast wouldn't interpret a crowd as threat? If only the villagers could see it as she did, a wounded soul turned gentle under care. She recalled the old forest lullaby, wishing that compassion could simply lull the entire town's fear to sleep. Yet, reality demanded a plan. No matter the path, the resolution seemed near, an emotional climax building. The battered wolf had defied death and mistrust, forging a bond with this old caretaker. Now, an entire village stood on the brink of final judgment. One false move could unravel months of healing. One moment of panic might confirm every doomsayer's warning. Eudora prayed for wisdom, for some gentle outcome that might shock everyone, not with violence, but with the triumph of a quiet, unwavering love. Beneath that rising tension, the fate of the wolf and the unity of the community balanced precariously, each heartbeat carrying them toward the concluding scene of this extraordinary tale. A swirl of debate consumed the days that followed. The village's sense of unquiet soared as residents weighed the possibility of a wolf demonstration. Some found the idea preposterous. Wolves aren't circus animals for exhibitions. Others insisted proof was needed to calm fears. Eudora felt torn, reluctant to subject the creature to a stressful ordeal, but equally wary that refusing might provoke the hot-headed into a clandestine hunt. She confided in Ms. Alvarez, who suggested a smaller, controlled demonstration with only key witnesses from the council or respected villagers. Minimizing crowds might reduce the wolf's anxiety. Rosa, hearing about this plan, expressed concern. The wolf sees you, Eudora, as a caretaker, but trust is fragile. Surrounded by strangers, it might revert to fight or flight instincts. Indeed, The scenario risked a meltdown. Eudora nodded, acknowledging the hazard. Yet the alternative, leaving a restless faction to harbor lethal intentions, felt equally dire. So they devised steps. Find a calm clearing near the forest edge, away from farmland or large crowds. Invite only a few representative townsfolk. Fitzpatrick, the loud skeptic, Miss Alvarez, Bren, and maybe one or two other respected community members. Eudora and Rosa would guide the wolf, ensuring it had a route to retreat if panicked. The group would keep safe distance, simply observing how the wolf behaves around Eudora. If all went well, Fitzpatrick might drop his demands for a hunt, letting Eudora finalize the wolf's recovery until it parted ways naturally. News of this potential demonstration spread, stoking further curiosity or dread. Some villagers declared it madness. What if the wolf lunges at Fitzpatrick? Will we have blood on our hands? Others called it a wise step. Once the council saw the wolf's docile manner with Eudora, the matter might be laid to rest. Tensions rose again. Eudora realized that, ironically, her entire project of compassion hinged on a single spectacle. A moment that could become a fiasco if the wolf felt threatened. Meanwhile, the wolf continued healing in the hidden glen. Each day, Eudora or Bren delivered minimal supplies, giving the animal space to roam as it pleased. It occasionally ventured out at night to hunt, returning by dawn. The leg wound, now mostly scarred over, allowed moderate movement. The wolf, while never purring like a house pet, showed signs of mild affection toward Eudora, a small tilt of the head or a slow blink that signaled it recognized her gentle presence. She cherished these glimpses of trust, worried they might be shattered in a contrived demonstration. Within a week, Ms. Alvarez scheduled the private demonstration. The participants agreed to gather at midday in a neutral clearing just inside the forest, ensuring no large crowd gathered. Fitzpatrick arrived armed, to Eudora's dismay, though he promised to keep the rifle slung unless threatened. 2 other council members joined, plus Bren and Rosa. Eudora, heart-pounding, prepared the glen by scattering some treats and ensuring there were no hidden triggers. She prayed to the forest spirits that the wolf, if it came at all, might sense only calm from them. At noon, the group assembled in uneasy silence. The plan was for Eudora to walk to a short distance from the wolf's usual path, call softly, and see if it approached. Everyone waited behind a partial screen of trees, with Ms. Alvarez cautioning them not to step forward abruptly. Fitzpatrick, stern-faced, observed Eudora with skeptical eyes. "If it attacks, we end this," he whispered. She nodded grimly, though her heart braced for heartbreak if things went wrong. Taking a deep breath, Eudora walked about 20 yards from the glen. She softly hummed the lullaby she'd used for the wolf countless times. Rosa stood near, ready to intervene if the wolf panicked. The forest breathed with midday stillness, no wind, no animals scurrying. Eudora repeated the gentle melody, then called out in a low tone, "I'm here, friend." She placed a small piece of boiled meat on a flat rock. Then she stepped back, giving space. Moments stretched, tension thick. Fitzpatrick watched, hand near his rifle. Ms. Alvarez bit her lip. Could the wolf truly come voluntarily with strangers about? Then from behind a cluster of ferns, the grey beast emerged. It paused, scanning warily. The group held breath. Eudora beckoned softly. The wolf took a hesitant step, muzzle twitching. Another step. Finally, it approached the rock, sniffed the morsel. Eudora knelt, arms relaxed, voice calm. The wolf's golden eyes flickered from her to the onlookers, evidently uneasy. Fitzpatrick's face was a swirl of apprehension and awe. The wolf lowered its head, swallowing the morsel. Then, to everyone's astonishment, it leaned slightly toward Eudora. She slowly placed a hand on its ruff, stroking once. No snarl, no recoil. The watchers gasped. Even Ms. Alvarez, who suspected such an outcome, was moved to see it live. Fitzpatrick's grip on his rifle loosened, eyes reflecting a mix of relief and near disbelief. Eudora exhaled a quivering sigh, tears shining in her eyes. This was the culminating moment of all her labor and love. The beast that had once been near death savage and cornered, now calmly accepted her presence even in front of new humans. The entire glade hushed in wonder. Bren, standing behind a tree, suppressed a whoop of joy. "Ms." Alvarez gently asked Fitzpatrick if he was convinced, to which he muttered, "Still cautious, but it's not what I expected." The wolf, sensing the tension, eventually stepped back, glancing around. Eudora allowed it free movement. It huffed, perhaps a farewell sign, then retreated among the ferns. The demonstration lasted only minutes, but the effect was profound. Fitzpatrick, clearing his throat, conceded to Miss. "Alvarez, I'll hold off calling for any further action. Maybe we can let nature take its course." The tension drained from the scene, replaced by awe at how an old woman's unwavering devotion overcame primal fear. Everyone parted ways, carrying a mixture of relief and amazement. Mrs. Alvarez believed the demonstration effectively ended the push for a lethal hunt. Fitzpatrick, though not exactly warm to the wolf, admitted the beast wasn't attacking unprovoked. Rosa, brimming with tears, squeezed Eudora's hand, praising her bravery. The villagers, hearing the outcomes, would be stunned. A near-tamed wolf approached Eudora in plain sight, harming no one. Indeed, it was an event that defied conventional belief about savage predators. Returning to her cottage, Eudora felt physically drained but emotionally elated. She recognized that the wolf was still wild, no pet to keep on a leash, but the trust they forged was real. The demonstration had ended the cycle of suspicion, at least for now. The final piece remained, letting the wolf fully recover and decide its path. In the hush of that day's twilight, Eudora found herself softly weeping, not from sorrow or fear, but from gratitude at a scene that not so long ago seemed impossible. She had approached a dying wolf, and together they'd shocked a community into re-evaluating the line between terror and tenderness. With the demonstration behind them, tensions in Briarwood cooled to a subdued calm. Word spread quickly. A group of respected townspeople actually witnessed the wolf interacting peacefully with Eudora. Residents who once clamored for a hunt found themselves at odds with a mounting public consensus that the creature, if left unprovoked, might not pose the dire threat they imagined. Fitzpatrick, while still cautious, refrained from fueling more fear, effectively ending any talk of mass hunts. In the weeks that followed, Eudora continued her routine visits, though she scaled back the daily nature of her care. The wolf, more mobile each day, no longer required constant bandage changes. The leg wound had scarred over, only minor stiffness remaining. At times, Eudora arrived at the glen to find the wolf absent, presumably out hunting. She'd leave water or a small meal, sensing it might be weaning off her help. And each time she discovered it had returned to rest at the lean-to, her heart warmed. The bond was there, but the wolf's wild instincts grew more pronounced, guiding it further from reliance on humans. Rosa took meticulous notes, marveling at how a single predator's story had not only reversed local hostility, but also opened new perspectives on living alongside nature. She even confided to Miss Alvarez about possibly starting a wolf awareness program, teaching children about these majestic animals' role in the ecosystem. Ms. Alvarez welcomed the initiative, believing that knowledge was the best bulwark against panic. The pilot surveys revealed fewer neighbors now saw wolves as unstoppable killers. One question lingered: would the wolf attempt rejoining a pack? Occasionally, howling at night hinted a distant pack territory lay to the forest's north. Eudora wondered if the wounded beast once belonged there. If so, might it still be accepted, or would it remain a lone wolf for life? She recognized she had no control over that outcome. The best she could do was maintain a transitional refuge in the glen and trust the wolf to choose its own path once fully restored. Each day, Eudora noted the beast's keener senses returning. She saw it trotting short distances with minimal limp, sniffing the wind as though pulled by the primal call of kin. She suspected the moment of departure could be near. The realization evoked mixed emotions: heartbreak at losing her silent companion, relief that it might reclaim its rightful domain. The notion that she, an old woman, had merely been a caretaker bridging the gap was enough to console her. The story of Eudora's wolf rescue reached neighboring villages, prompting occasional visitors, hoping to glimpse the tamed wolf. Eudora politely turned them away, defending the wolf's privacy. Ms. Alvarez, worried about turning the wolf into a spectacle, discouraged tourism of any kind. The forest glen was not a zoo enclosure, after all. The best outcome was letting the wolf remain free from crowds. The mayor, once an indifferent observer, now praised Eudora's approach to handle the matter discreetly, without fueling rumors of domestication. Meanwhile, Eudora sensed a circle closing. Whenever she tended the wolf's final scabs, she found that it no longer flinched from her touch. Sometimes it rolled slightly to expose the wounded flank, almost as if granting permission to check. Observing that relaxed posture, Eudora recalled the first day when its body trembled in agony. She realized she had achieved more than healing a wound. She'd helped restore a life. Another day, while feeding it, the wolf brushed its muzzle gently against her hand, a silent, profound gesture. The old woman felt tears brimming, understanding they were nearing the apex of their bond. Late one afternoon, Eudora arrived at the glen to find the wolf standing near the tree line, tail raised, muzzle lifted to the breeze. She had a strong sense that it was prepared to depart. Its gaze swept the clearing, pausing on the lean-to, then on Eudora. She approached quietly, a small container of water in hand. The wolf locked eyes with her. For several heartbeats, neither moved. In that stillness, Eudora perceived a silent farewell, a mixture of gratitude and primal yearning for the open forest. She extended a hand, but the wolf only stepped forward enough to press its muzzle softly to her palm. Then, with a final flick of its tail, it turned, bounding off into the labyrinth of pines. Eudora watched it vanish, tears slipping down her cheeks unrestrained. She felt neither despair nor regret, only awe at the ephemeral miracle of their shared journey. Within days, Eudora confirmed the wolf had not returned to the glen. She left a few offerings and discovering them untouched. Bren scouted for tracks, concluding the beast had roamed north, possibly seeking territory or a distant pack. The closure left the glen empty of its occupant, but an imprint of trust lingered in that mossy clearing. Eudora, though missing the daily caretaker role, found her spirit lighter. She realized that completing the circle, saving the wolf from death and letting it reclaim its wild nature, was the purest outcome. Villagers, upon hearing the news, expressed relief. Some huntsmen quietly admitted admiration for Eudora's success. Mrs. Alvarez shared with the council how the matter resolved itself without violence, reinforcing that coexisting with predators, while complex, wasn't unachievable. Fitzpatrick, though not overtly praising her, dropped any demands to track or harm the wolf. The pilot project, if one may call Eudora's discreet approach such, ended not with a forced captivity or tragedy, but with the wolf's quiet return to freedom. Over time, Briarwood's memory of the dying wolf that an old woman saved took on an almost legendary glow. Children repeated the tale in wide-eyed wonder, sometimes embellishing that Eudora could speak the wolf's tongue. The old woman, though never seeking fame, became a symbolic figure of compassion bridging fear and the wilderness. In her modest cottage, she kept the battered bandages from those early days, a small relic of how fate led her to do something that truly shocked everyone. Approach a mortally wounded predator and nurse it until it found the strength to live free again. As Eudora resumed her quieter life, she wondered if the wolf, out in the wide forest or further realms, sometimes recalled the gentle hands that once removed its pain. She felt certain their bond, etched in those nights by the creek, lingered in the creature's memory. And if, by chance, she ever heard a lone howl echoing across the pine ridges, she would smile knowingly, content that the wolf's story had concluded with renewed life, an outcome no one but Eudora had dared to envision. In the months after the wolf's departure, Briarwood settled back into its gentle routine, yet traces of the extraordinary lingered. Eudora quietly returned to foraging for herbs along forest edges, greeted now with friendlier nods from neighbors. Some, once scornful, now asked if she'd encountered any new wounded creatures. She smiled, shaking her head, saying that the forest seemed at peace for the time being. People had recognized that the presence of one predator, when approached with empathy rather than hostility, did not inevitably cause chaos. A subtle shift in how villagers approached nature became evident. Where before they might have shot at a prowling fox or raccoon, a growing number turned to live traps and relocation methods, or simply called Eudora or Bren for guidance. Even Fitzpatrick softened in public discussions, describing how we avoided a real crisis thanks to the old woman's persistence. Ms. Alvarez, capitalizing on the calmer environment, proposed a small community fund to handle future wildlife cases more humanely. The council approved it, ensuring a minimal but official line of support for Eudora-type interventions if needed again. The local children, enthralled by the story, occasionally spied Eudora crossing the fields, calling her the Wolf Lady, with a tone of admiration. She'd wave politely, not entirely comfortable with the attention, but grateful that fear was no longer the main driver in Briarwood's relationship with wild creatures. At her cottage, Eudora often sat by the window in the late afternoons, crocheting or sipping herbal tea, recollecting the nights she knelt beside that wounded wolf. She would replay the silent communication in its eyes, the gratitude in each subtle wag of its tail, and the remarkable closeness that overcame any savage barrier. It amazed her that her own life's twilight found such a shining demonstration of compassion's power. She recognized the day would come when age finally claimed her, but the memory of bridging that primal gap brought her a deep, reassuring peace. Sometimes she roamed deeper into the forest, scanning for wolf tracks. She discovered none, concluding that the beast likely traveled far north, perhaps rejoining its kin or forging new territory. She harbored a gentle hope that the wolf thrived, carrying the memory of her care. Eudora had heard stories of wolves sometimes forging unbreakable bonds, returning unexpectedly. She told herself not to cling to that possibility, but a small corner of her heart left the door open for that miracle. One crisp autumn morning, Eudora found footprints near the creek not far from her initial discovery site. At first, she assumed they were from passing dogs, but the size suggested a wolf, or possibly more than one. Anxiety pricked at her. Was the once lonely wolf returning with a pack? She worried the villagers might revert to panic if multiple wolves started roaming. She carefully followed the tracks a short way, discovering they led deeper into the forest, well away from farmland. No sign of a confrontation or intrusion. Eudora exhaled relief, suspecting it might be a traveling pack. She quietly left some leftover meat, a mild invitation. But no daily caretaker role was needed this time. When rumors of potential new wolf tracks spread, the reaction was far less hysterical than in the past. Some residents shrugged. Wolves pass through sometimes. So long as they're not aggressive, we let them be, right? Ms. Alvarez indicated yes, referencing how quickly tension can be diffused if no direct threat appears. The difference was night and day from months ago, testifying to how one old woman's approach to a dying wolf had permanently altered the community's psyche. In local gatherings, a new legend formed around Eudora's encounter. They said she walked fearlessly into the jaws of a dying beast, her compassion alone subduing it. While some details grew exaggerated, like claims she touched its heart with a single hand, the core truth remained. Eudora nursed a savage creature back from the brink, forging a temporary but profound bond. Children repeated the story around campfires, gleaning lessons in kindness and the possibility that not all threats must be met with violence. Even Bren, not known for sentimentality, shared with traveling merchants how he witnessed the wolf accept Eudora's gentle presence, transforming from a near-dead predator into a more docile companion. It opened my eyes, he often concluded, that fear can be undone by a bigger measure of kindness than I ever guessed. As the season turned to winter, Eudora found new purpose in guiding younger villagers in mild herbal treatments for livestock, or gently relocating small nuisance animals. She discovered an unexpected calling, bridging the gap between an older, nature-centric wisdom and the more modern, fear-based approach many had. The story of the wolf advanced that bridging in ways few talks or laws could. Miss Alvarez even suggested forming a monthly wildlife harmony meeting where folks could learn from Eudora about coexisting with local fauna. Sometimes, in the quiet hush of snowy nights, Eudora stared out her window, imagination drifting to wherever that wounded wolf might roam. She pictured it, bounding across moonlit valleys, strong once again, no bullet or snare cutting its life short. A tear of joy would slip down her cheek at the thought that she, an ordinary elder with no special powers, had played a part in freeing it from a cruel fate. The recollection that it had once nuzzled her palm, that a savage heart had recognized her gentleness, remained her greatest affirmation. With no new crises on the horizon, the final chord of Eudora's saga approached a calm resolution. The village found itself changed, eyes opened to a kinder approach. The battered beast that once lay at death's door no longer haunted farmland. Eudora, having done what many deemed impossible, returned to a humble daily life, though with a deeper glow in her spirit. Only the culminating coda remained, an acknowledgement from the entire town that indeed, an old woman approached a dying wolf and did something that would echo for generations. The last page of this tale would carry the emotional summation, weaving together the tears, triumph and quiet wonder that redefined Briarwood's bond with the wild. As winter settled fully upon the land, Briarwood's pines wore gentle snowcaps, and the hush of cold air muffled all but the crunch of boots on frosty ground. Eudora continued her life's rhythms, collecting firewood, brewing teas, occasionally helping a neighbor with an herbal remedy. The memory of the wolf no longer consumed daily talk, yet its legend persisted, a quiet undercurrent shaping villagers' softened stance on wildlife. Ms. Alvarez moved forward with a small council directive. Briarwood fosters humane coexistence, referencing the wolf incident as a success story. In short, a sense of normalcy returned, albeit with a kinder lens. Midwinter, the mayor decided to host a community harvest remembrance, an old tradition marking the end of the year's final harvests. People gathered in the village's main hall for storytelling, dancing, and a potluck meal. Eudora, typically shy of gatherings, accepted Mrs. Alvarez's invitation. She wore her simplest cloak, bringing a basket of fresh bread she'd baked, laced with aromatic herbs. Surrounded by laughter, music, and the swirl of neighbors, Eudora found the mood far different from the tension-laden assemblies months prior. At the event, Bren, Miss Alvarez, and even Fitzpatrick each shared a brief reflection on the year's changes. Fitzpatrick, in a surprising gesture, mentioned that fear sometimes blinds us, but thanks to certain individuals, we found a better path. Though not naming Eudora outright, the implication drew a round of polite applause. Eudora listened quietly, a faint smile on her lips, not seeking the spotlight but touched by the subtle acknowledgement that her actions bridged a gap once deemed impossible. Late in the evening, Ms. Alvarez asked Eudora if she might lead a short blessing or lullaby. In front of the flickering hearth, Eudora softly hummed the same forest lullaby she had sung to the wounded wolf so many nights. A hush enveloped the hall. The melody's haunting sweetness moved more than a few to tears, for many recognized it as the tune rumored to calm the wolf. In that moment, the entire community's heart seemed to align with the old woman's. The last note faded to a hush, followed by an outpouring of applause. The year had ended on a note of acceptance, forging a memory that would endure. A few days after the harvest remembrance, Eudora ventured beyond the village for one of her usual walks. Something drew her along the old trail, heading deeper, reminiscent of her earlier journeys to the glen. The crisp air felt heavier, as though carrying a presence. She approached the spot where she once discovered footprints leading away. Initially, she saw nothing unusual, but as she turned to head back, an unmistakable silhouette emerged from behind a spruce. A wolf, muscular, healthy, with a distinct scar over its flank. Could it be her rescued companion? Heart pounding, Eudora froze. The wolf fixed its gaze on her. Memories flooded her, the bandaging, the lullabies, the near confrontation with hunters. Slowly, she raised her hand in a gentle wave, not stepping closer. The wolf sniffed the air, tail neither fully lowered nor wagging. Eudora recognized it might be a fleeting visit. She whispered, "It's you, isn't it?" The wolf huffed quietly, an exhale that might pass for acknowledgement. For a timeless minute, they remained locked in mutual recognition, wild beast and caretaker, two hearts that once overcame death's threshold. Then, in a graceful bound, the wolf vanished into the undergrowth. Eudora smiled through tears. She realized it was likely a farewell or a silent promise that life continued, unshackled by old wounds. That single glimpse validated months of effort, proving the wolf thrived. Eudora's breath caught, overwhelmed by gratitude. She returned to her cottage, tears of joy glinting in the winter sunlight. Word of Eudora glimpsing the wolf quickly spread, but no panic followed. The legend grew that the wolf had come to pay its final respects. Some neighbors proposed it was an omen or sign, an anecdote weaving into local lore. Fitzpatrick heard the news without alarm, shrugging, "If it's not harming us, let it be." People marveled at how months earlier, a single sighting could have sparked a witch hunt, yet now they accepted it with calm. The quiet acceptance validated Eudora's conviction that hearts can indeed change. As days rolled by, no more sightings of that wolf emerged. Eudora resumed her herbal chores, mindful that her final years brimmed with purpose rather than idle solitude. Occasionally, she caught herself humming that lullaby near her window, glancing at the forest line. She might never see the wolf again, but the bond they shared transcended appearances. In the hush of an evening, she admitted that saving the wolf had also saved her from a sort of spiritual stagnation. She discovered a new dimension of empathy at age many considered over the hill. Rosa stayed in contact, sometimes joining Eudora on short forest walks, marveling at the unscarred calm that replaced the old tension. They encountered smaller animals, foxes, deer, none threatened by humans anymore. A child or two might ask Eudora for stories about the dying wolf, enthralled by how she approached it. She'd weave the narrative with a gentle moral about choosing mercy when fear beckoned cruelty. The wonder in their young eyes reaffirmed that the next generation might hold even greater compassion for living creatures. In the silence of another winter's dusk, Eudora recognized the circle was complete. No fierce hunts, no kill orders. The battered creature once left to die found a caretaker's grace, shocking an entire community into re-evaluating beliefs about wolves, old women, and the power of empathy. The last step was to share the final moral in a way that left hearts warmed, ensuring that the events would not fade into rumor but stand as a testament. The time for a concluding reflection was at hand, a reflection on how a single fearless act can transform fear into wonder, forging an unbreakable link between a near-death wolf and an aging caretaker who chose to see beyond the beast's fangs. This final coda would linger as an echo in every villager's mind. A hush fell over the entire village one late spring evening, as Ms. Alvarez organized an informal celebration to honor guardians of the wild, focusing on how fear had been replaced by a measure of peace in Briarwood. Neighbors arrived carrying baskets of food or small crafts, gathering in a clearing near the forest's boundary. They erected a simple wooden platform draped in wildflowers, reminiscent of Eudora's beloved forest. Children giggled around a bonfire, while elders looked on with nostalgic smiles. The highlight of this impromptu ceremony was acknowledging how a once-dying wolf, discovered by an elderly woman, changed local perspectives. Miss Alvarez took the makeshift stage, retelling the story from the night Eudora first encountered the wounded predator. Many nodded, remembering the tension that had overshadowed the village. Ms. Alvarez praised Eudora's unwavering empathy, which averted violence and sparked a new approach to living alongside nature. As Ms. Alvarez finished, the crowd parted to let Eudora gently step forward. The old woman, her hair now fully silver, walked with a cane but radiated calm. Applause swelled from all sides, villagers showing genuine respect. Fitzpatrick, lingering at the edge, nodded stiffly in acknowledgement. Eudora, voice trembling with humility, thanked them. We all overcame fear together, not just me. In her hand, she held a small piece of worn cloth, a strip from the bandage used to treat the wolf's wound. She raised it, saying, "This scrap reminds me how simple an act of care can change destinies. I approached a dying wolf, and in saving it, I think we saved something within ourselves, our capacity for compassion." Tears glistened in the eyes of onlookers. In that hush, the final climactic chord of their shared journey rang. The entire village, once rife with panic, now recognized the deeper moral: bridging fear with empathy can yield wonders surpassing all expectations. At the apex of emotion, a child called out, "Eudora, are there more wolves?" She smiled, replying that the forest likely held many mysteries, but none to fear if they approached them with caution and respect. Laughter rippled, a release of tension from old anxieties. The sense of communal relief soared. People spontaneously sang a folksy tune, reminiscent of Eudora's lullaby, weaving a communal expression of gratitude that they'd found harmony in a place once overshadowed by dread. As the gathering dispersed, Eudora lingered near the forest's edge, gazing at the darkening pines. She recalled in her heart the final memory of seeing the healed wolf vanish into the wilderness, renewed strength shining in its eyes. The knowledge that her unusual act of bravery, approaching a dying predator with open arms, had left an indelible mark on an entire town gave her deep peace. She realized the wolf's survival story was now woven into the very fabric of Briarwood's identity. In the days that followed, the final transformation of the community shone clearly. Men who once boasted of hunts now participated in wildlife appreciation talks. Children, previously taught to fear savage beasts, learned to differentiate between wise caution and blind hysteria. Some older villagers, inspired by Eudora's devotion, took up small-scale volunteer tasks like cleaning forest trails or leaving water out in drought. Even Fitzpatrick quietly admitted at a council meeting that lethal hunts needn't be the first solution. For Eudora, life resumed a gentle pattern. She rose with the dawn to tend her herb garden, sometimes taking short forays into the forest. Each step reminded her how close she'd come to tragedy that first night, and how differently it all ended. She found contentment in her final years, no longer lonely but embraced by a village that saw her as both wise elder and quiet hero. Months later, the council had a wooden plaque installed near the forest's entrance, in honor of compassion beyond fear. Here, an old woman tended a dying wolf and showed us the power of mercy in darkness. Villagers would pause to read it, sometimes tipping their hats in silent gratitude. The younger generation, hearing the story from grandparents, found it more like a fairy tale but recognized it as truth. Through Eudora's gentleness and the wolf's relinquished aggression, they learned that redemption is possible even for the fiercest adversaries when met with unwavering care. On an evening suffused with golden light, Eudora found herself once again near the forest boundary. Memories of the wolf swirled gently, not as heartbreak but as a warm, fulfilled remembrance. She might never see it again, but the knowledge that it ran free, its life reclaimed from death's doorstep, was the ultimate triumph. That single improbable encounter had indeed shocked everyone, transforming a small hamlet's fears into a living testament that empathy can outshine terror. At last, Eudora felt her role was complete, her soul at peace. She closed her eyes, hearing the faint hush of a breeze among the pines. Perhaps from somewhere out there, the wolf roamed still, a silent guardian of the wild. With a final tear slipping down her cheek, Eudora whispered, "Farewell, my friend," stepping away, cane tapping softly as she returned home under the tranquil sky. Thus concluded the tale that began with an old woman leaning over a dying wolf and ended with an entire community awakened to the grace that emerges when we dare to see past savage exteriors into the shared bond of life. Thank you for sharing in this deeply moving story of Eudora and the dying wolf. If their journey touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more inspirational, emotion-filled narratives. Share this story with friends or family who believe in the power of compassion to transform fear. Join us next time for another tale of courage, empathy, and the bonds that unite us all, human and animal alike.